Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the Department of Comparative Literature for the Bose Memorial Lecture 2023. It's a pleasure and an honor to have all of you with us, and I know it's difficult to be here together at once. So thank you very much for making time out of your busy schedules to be with us. The Bose Memorial Lecture has been a long-time tradition of the department, and we've had many well-known speakers with us for a long time, and it has been an honor throughout. We were just talking a little before the talk, and I remember some of this. I think the first talk that I attended was I was in undergrad second year in the department. We've had Joy Goswami, we've had Kushari Dyson, we've had Rabindranath Studies Centre, and many others, Rabindranath Studies Centre and others who have spoken as well. In recent times, we've also had several online lectures on this. So this is an in-person event for a long time, and we welcome all of you here. We are grateful to everyone who is here today. The Honorable Dean Madam of the Faculty of Arts was supposed to be here today, but could not make it due to unavoidable circumstances. But she has been very kind and has left a message for us. I would request my colleague, Professor Parthashanti Bhomik, to read the message from Dean Madam, Professor Malavika Roy.
Today is a very special day for the Department of Comparative Literature, as the Buddhadeva Bose Memorial Lecture is being held in offline mode, first time after COVID pandemic. The Department of Comparative Literature has a long tradition of hosting Buddhadeva Bose Memorial Lecture in memory of the founder father of the department. I am also happy to know that a memoir of his daughter, Damayanti Basu Singh, will also be inaugurated on this occasion. I wish I could attend the lecture on an absolutely fascinating topic in person, but duty calls. I convey my best wishes to the department and welcome Professor Lal and the participants on behalf of the faculty. Malavika Roy, Dean, Faculty of Arts.
Thank you, Bangla. May I please invite Dr. Shantu Rashgupta to say a few words. We wanted all to remember Buddhadeva Bose on his birthday today, and we would like Shantu to say a few words. Thank you.
I think before that, can we ask you to take your seats, please? Good evening, this is the Departmental Citation. Buddhadeva Bose, 1908 to 1974, pioneered the study of comparative literature in India. He founded the first Department of Comparative Literature in India at Jadavpur University here. He was one of the towering figures of modernity in Bangla and Indian literatures. He was a poet, a novelist, a playwright, a short story writer, and an essayist. He has left behind many influential plays like Abushira Tormini, Kolkata Electra, and Pratham Partho, and popular and powerful novels like Tithidor, Doshor Godhuli, and Shesh Ambulipi, and poetry collections such as Bondi Bandana, Notun Pada, and the much later but remarkable J. Mahar Alor Poti. Buddhadev did his MA in English from Dhaka University and then moved to Calcutta. He was deeply involved with Kolonial and later on went to establish Kobita, the influential periodical that defined the course of Bangla poetry for years together. As editor of Kobita, he took on the responsibility of identifying and promoting young talents in Bangla poetry, a responsibility he discharged for decades. Buddhadev took to writing early. He published Bondi Bandana and Shara, the first novel, when he was still in his teens. He was a prolific writer and left behind more than 40 novels and numerous titles in other genres. Buddhadev was a keen enthusiast of literature from different parts of the world, perhaps enthused by Rabindranath's 1906 lecture at the National Council of Education on Vishwa Sahitya, where he enunciated the need to look out at the world of arts instead of allowing oneself to get tied down by narrow concerns. He was also a keen translator and is remembered for his translations of Baudelaire's poetry in Bangla, and Rilke and Hölderlin were also other poets whom he translated. He was also a very important and influential literary critic. According to many, it was Buddhadeva who pioneered a modern approach to reading and studying Rabindranath. Students of comparative literature also remember him for his seminal essay called Comparative Literature in India, which was first published in the Yearbook of Comparative and General Literature in 1959. The essay unveils his thoughts unambiguously as he seeks there to explain how and why comparative literature was being done at Jadavpur University in the early phase, in what is a passionate defense of this discipline there. Buddhadeva's continuous relevance is today highlighted by the fact that this essay is still taught as prescribed reading in the core course of JUCL at both the UG and PG levels. His relevance is also stressed by the recent comments of the prolific translator Abhijit Gupta, who delivered the previous Buddhadeva Bose Memorial Lecture at JU, where he mentioned that of all the writers he has translated so far, Buddhadeva Bose translating Buddhadeva Bose was what fascinated, challenged him, and excited him the most. JUCL remembers Buddhadeva Bose with admiration on this day every year with this lecture dedicated to his memory. And the list of those who have delivered the lecture in previous years includes Ashok Mitra, Nourish Kubo, Kamildev, Shankar Ghosh, Joy Goswami, Rabindranath Studies Centre, and other names that Devoshri has already mentioned, and many others. So we look forward to today's session, and I will hand over the session to Professor Abhijit Gupta, and he will introduce the speaker, who of course belongs to JUCL, also having taught here for a couple of years in the Department of Comparative Literature. To introduce Abhijit Gupta, who of course needs no introduction but has to be introduced. He is Professor of English at Jadavpur University and Director of Jadavpur University Press and of the School of Cultural Texts and Records. He was co-editor along with Swapan Chakravorty of the Book History in India series, of which 4 volumes have been published. A 5th volume of this series is under preparation. He was associate editor for South Asia of the Oxford Companion to the Book. His bibliography and location register of all the books printed in Bengali from 1801 to 1914 is now the basis of the 2 Centuries of Indian Print project at the British Library, London. His latest book, The Spread of Print in Colonial India into the Hinterland, 2021, is just out from Cambridge University Press. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Shankar, for that introduction, and let me say what an honor and pleasure it is for me, 2 years in succession, to introduce the speaker for the Buddhadeva Bose Memorial Lecture organized by the Department of Comparative Literature at Jadavpur University. It is indeed a very pleasant duty for me to introduce Professor Ananda Lal, a long-time colleague and friend. Ananda Lal retired as Professor of English and coordinator of the Rabindranath Studies Centre at Jadavpur University. His important books include Rabindranath Tagore 3 plays, the Oxford Companion to Indian Theatre, Indian Drama in English for Beginnings, Utpal Dutt, Barricade, and Songs of Tagore. He has translated a wide range of Bangla poetry into English, to Rabindranath, to Jibanananda, to Joy Goswami. He has directed 2 Tagore plays on stage and conceptualized, introduced, and narrated a CD of Tagore's own audio recordings titled The Voice of Rabindranath Tagore. He directs Writers' Workshop, Kolkata, and runs KolkataTheatre.com. I can say many more things about Ananda. He says, because this is of course what everyone knows about him, but as you can see, he's multifaceted. But his engagement with theatre is something which will also made him a director. I've worked with him on 4 or 5 different plays, when both before and after I joined the Department of English as a member of the faculty. In these days, he showed an unfortunate tendency to cast me as a drunkard. I don't know why, but that was the case with Amajit Penis and Bertolt Brecht's Manish Man, which I greatly enjoyed. Wished against Canada, probably. I really miss those days, but and his talk today is titled, I suppose, his innate love of alliteration. Rabindrasangit revisited transmission, translation, transcription. Over to you, Ananda.
Thank you so much, Abhijit. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here, and of course, the Department of Comparative Literature, where I indeed did teach at the beginning when I first joined Jadavpur University. English came much later. Comparative was first. Thank you to the department's faculty for inviting me to deliver this extremely prestigious memorial lecture. I consider it really an honor, and on top of that, a privilege to be delivering the Bose Memorial Lecture this year. Now, the subject may baffle you because it is all about Rabindranath, which is like preaching to the converted. This was deliberate on my part simply because Buddhadeva had this long engagement with Rabindranath, and I felt that in my own way, which has involved translation of Rabindranath, interpreting Rabindranath, and in the latest case of doing that, my new book is actually out, Founts of Knowledge, which also involves transcription of Rabindrasangit into Western staff notation. So what I will do actually is, in fact, very briefly, as succinctly as possible, give you my experiments, my arguments, perhaps more than experiments, my arguments in this book, and knowing full well that all of you are Rabindranath experts. You are all specialists in Rabindranath. We all are. In fact, the reason for this book actually was to reach Rabindranath outreach him to the non-Bengali audiences, which has not been done even today, I believe, as much as it should have been before. Let me just, by way of, before I enter the talk proper, by way of anecdotal memory, let me just remember the first time I saw, I won't say met, Buddhadeva, which was in the 1960s, when I was a young boy, and my father had been invited to deliver a lecture here, and sitting in front, of course, was Buddhadeva himself, and my mother got hold of me by the arm and dragged me to him and said, Buddhadev Babu, ini Buddhadev Babu, pranam karo. So obviously, I dutifully obeyed the instruction. I didn't know at that time who he was. I was very young. As I said, this was the 1960s. But this talk today is by way of another pronoun, to Buddhadev Babu, if I might. I am also extremely delighted that a friend of my family and also a student of Buddhadeva, who's one of the earliest graduates of Complete here in this department, has actually come to this occasion, this event. Dr. Jhorna Bose Parchat, whom I lovingly, we all lovingly call Varnamashi. Varnamashi, you were here from 50?
I was the third batch.
The third batch. So it's there is a continuity here for those of you who are in this discipline. I hope I will do everyone justice. So I move into the talk proper. Thank you. Because it's a formal lecture, I am not in the habit of actually reading from either papers or the laptop, but because it's formal on this occasion, I thought I don't want to make any kind of casual comments off the cuff, and I will actually present something from here. As early as the 1930s, Professor Philippe Stern of pardonnez-moi, L'École du Louvre, I quote him, had sensed that the vital significance of Tagore's work was not just rhythmical language, verse, nor was it music without words. It was an inseparable union of both. Song. Stern's friend, the musicologist Arnold Barricade, defined Tagore's skillful craft as, I quote him, the delicate moulding of one single unaccompanied melodical line in which the emotional overtones of his poem found expression. Once again, both these elements together, which is obvious in the matter of any song, but I think Rabindranath actually took it to an extreme high achievement. Rabindranath's prodigious output of songs first needs to be placed in a global perspective. 2000 or just over 2000, I am not going to argue about the exact number. 2000 may seem just a huge number, like the quantities Rabindranath produced in every form and genre of literature and art. What we do not usually find in assessments of his achievements is a comparison with other famous songwriters. There are lyricists who wrote the words to more songs. There are melodists who composed the music to more songs. But we are considering here only those who both wrote and composed original songs themselves. These are things that actually people don't know, even over here, and they don't talk about or even write about. In the Euro-American world, Franz Schubert, who set many poems by others to music, and Tagore's fellow Nobel Prize winning songwriter, Bob Dylan, each composed about 600 songs. 600. Of course, the Nobel Prize Committee did not award Tagore for his songs, but for his poetry. Although the English Gitanjali, the only book by him that they could read and cited, included mostly songs in its original Bengali incarnation, and in his English translation was indicatively subtitled Song Offerings. But people don't pay heed to that as much as they should. In Indian tradition too, such numbers, and I am consciously punning on the other meaning of the word numbers as synonym for songs, are rare. Many thousands of songs are attributed to Tyagaraja, but only about 700 survive. At present, the popular composer Ilayaraja holds some kind of record at 7,000 songs, but many of them tunes to others' lyrics. In Bengal, only the songs of Kazi Nazrul Islam surpass Tagore's in quantity. Nobody else coming remotely close to them. Readers, and of course in this case the audience, should note that I am not making any obviously absurd judgment that quantity signifies quality. I merely wish to place these numbers on the table for the sake of information in our IT age. A musical oeuvre as large as Tagore's, in a population counted as the 5th or 6th largest in the world by language, deserves far greater treatment and analysis internationally than it has received so far. Admittedly, thousands of much-loved recordings of Rabindrasangit circulate worldwide, but almost exclusively among Bengali speakers. Whenever the community meets, live Rabindrasangit dominates the proceedings for every conceivable occasion, from weddings to funerals. Our own respected Pavitra Babu Pavitra Sarkar begins his introduction to an edition of Rabindrasangit with this sentence. I translate into English. The original, of course, is in Bangla. If anyone questions us what is the finest harvest of Bengali culture, our unhesitant answer is Rabindranath's songs. Perhaps one might proffer a qualification that educated Bengali society gives Rabindrasangit a higher place than in rural communities. But Professor Sarkar's claim, nonetheless, holds true. Yet a huge gap exists in informed publications in English about Rabindrasangit, while inaccuracies about it abound in our age, information-driven age, as I said. Even, let us say, in the foremost international reference work on music, the Grove Music Online project, contributed by a Tagore specialist. This is the entry on Rabindranath in the Grove Music Online. You can check it out. I quote, "They, that is Rabindrasangit, have become the national music of West Bengal and Bangladesh." West Bengal, I wish, but is not a nation, and Bangladesh may not accept Rabindrasangit as her national music. We need to be careful about, what we unthinkingly digest. Many Bangla books on Rabindrasangit have been authored by eminent scholars and singers, yet dependable monographs in English, specifically on this subject, number only 3 after over 60 years of his death. A primer by the musicologist Rabindranath Tagore, a collection of essays by Tagore's student and actor, musician, dancer, Shantidev Ghosh. This is translated from one of Shantidev Ghosh's Bengali books, and a musical biography by the singer Reba Shaw. Perhaps understandably so, this is the case because it requires technical musical expertise as well as translatorial competence and strategy to analyze Rabindranath songs in writing with the purpose of making them more comprehensible to an international audience. Similarly, only 5 main anthologies have appeared in print of Western staff notations, of about 200 Rabindrasangit in all out of 2,000 plus. 2 slim collections by European musicians who had visited Tagore in Shantiniketan, Ananda Lal, I have mentioned, and Arthur Geddes. A substantial 2-volume set published by India's National Academy of Performing Arts, the Sangeet Natak Academy, and my own doctoral dissertation containing all the songs in 3 Rabindranath plays. Here I must mention Shokli Rai's long essay in Bangla on Rabindrasangit Bhabbar Kotha, never translated in full into English before, which serves as the best commentary on Rabindrasangit for the ordinary reader. Hence the necessity of presenting it to a global audience. So I translated it for this book. Shokli Babu placed Rabindranath in the context and tradition of Indian music in this essay, which was originally published in Ekhon. You all know of Ekhon. Now it's been collected elsewhere. Discussed the diversity of Tagore's musical influences, argued that Rabindrasangit was in danger of being watered down in performance by quote-unquote mediocrities. Something to think about. He says this in the 1960s. pointed out the importance of the notated scores as well as permissible deviations from them, and even touched on suitable instrumental accompaniment. I should emphasize that his opinions assume importance for three main reasons. He was preeminent among the very few experts who studied in Shantiniketan and was thus steeped in Rabindranath and Rabindrasangit, who also knew Western music thoroughly and could play it, and who himself composed and played music. This combination is very difficult to find, unfortunately, even nowadays. Those who can do all three actually move out of the Rabindranath Studies zone and do other things. So, I proceed now to some examples of where I feel we should perhaps pay more attention to the content of Rabindrasangit, the lyrics, followed by music, the next part, and finally the theatrical angle. Rabindranath himself authorized the classification of his songs' printed texts. Obviously, you know the Gita Vidan, which I also brought along, initially in 3 volumes under 6 broad headings, what we call Porjai. In sequence, Puja, 617 songs, Shodesh, 46, Prem, 395, Prakriti, 283, Vichitra, 140, and Anushtanik, 21. 6. Porjai. Initially, these 1,500 songs were succeeded by sections titled Giti Natto or Nitto Natto, an early book which was Bhanushinghar Padavali, and Natto Giti, 130 of them. In turn, followed by shorter sections with previously uncollected songs, Jatiyo Shangit, Puja o Prarthana, Anushtanik Shangit, Prem o Prakriti. Already you can tell that there was a certain randomness because certain songs had not been collected in the initial edition. Now, my point is that none of these categories is watertight, as we all know. Rabindrasangit singers know of, and Rabindranath scholars acknowledge the thematic overlap in many of the songs. The clearest evidence lies in Rabindranath's inheritance of the Indian tradition, in which the vocabulary of romantic love permeates lyrics of devotional love so deeply that it is often impossible to differentiate between puja and prem, love. Since it is equally impossible for most non-Bengali readers to understand Rabindranath's original words, I have done my translations as faithfully to the letter and form as possible to preserve this double textuality, both puja and love. In so doing, I also have issued a caveat that consciously echoes Rabindranath's statement, his own statement, distinguishing poetry from song lyrics. I quote him, "A normal poem is for reading, and a poem for music is for hearing. Therefore, it is proper not to judge a song's poetry by reading. A very good poem might be bad for singing, and a very good song might not be good for reading." Obviously, this disclaimer works double for lyrics in translation. I mean, if you think of, I just mentioned a few songs, and you will recognize what I mean. Ogo Kangal. Ogo Kangal has been placed in Prem, in the Prem Porjai. But is it really only that? The idea of, or the conceit, as we say in literary studies, of giving away all that one has to the extent of impoverishing oneself unites both sacred and secular love. Only if one becomes bereft of everything, turned into a destitute, Kangal, can one attain the same plane as the supreme beggar who holds out cupped palms to us for more. Is that a plain song? In Esho Esho Phire Esho, also written, number 252 according to the Gita Vidan, we find such epithets as Nath and Chirantan, belying the Modhu, Bondhu, whom the song addresses. So it's dual. And why, therefore, do we actually fixate ourselves on these so-called categories? We know there was a publishing history behind the Gita Vidan, where Rabindranath was constantly being told that it's easier for the reader to actually have certain categories, classify them properly according to these subjects. But actually, I think he should have resisted that. Anyway, let us also note that Rabindranath did not confine his devotional songs to love as mutually kind of inclusive. No. Frequently, he describes the one above in musical terms. Consider, for instance, one of the earliest songs in the puja category, Tomar Shure Thara. Clearly, here it is meta music. He's identifying the you, tumi, with, I'll use the English translation, streams of your music, the sound. With sound my life surround. You'll understand the Bangla. Tune my soul, Veena, strings to that sound, so that stars of song rise up in my heart at the end of the day. This is pretty strong stuff in terms of conceptualization. As I said, meta music. And a Rabindrik would instantly recall the culminating song of Olubrata. Orugovina, Ruperarare, Rukiye Vaise. Same kind of thing. Human spiritual union, but through music, song. Of course, that does not mean that all of Rabindranath's love songs are interchangeable with puja. Right? That would be a gross generalization which can easily be proved wrong. In, for instance, Amar Poran Loe. Despite the song, the words or phrases in the song that we know of, it's placed in the love category, perhaps rightly so, because the core remains decidedly romantic, whereas the posture is of abject submission, but romantic. So you can have all kinds. I mean, it's absolutely impossible to simplify these categories or thematic analyses of them. And so is the appeal for remembrance, perhaps of unrequited love, in that perennial favorite that we all know, Tohu Mone Rekho. That is in brain, and clearly it is brain which is the subject here, Tohu Mone Rekho. Now, then moving ahead, the dual forces of puja and brain pervade the Shodesh section or porchai as well. This phenomenon is epitomized by the obvious cases, which we only too often forget, the national anthems of India and Bangladesh. In Janavanamano, the Vidhata, which Tagore himself translated as dispenser of the destiny of Bharat, India, is in most Indian languages taken to mean all kinds of things. There are many associations: regulator, controller, director in common parlance, while of course it is also a synonym for God in sacred terms. How does one translate? It's almost impossible. And I've done a translation myself of the entire, by the way, not just the first stanza, but all 5 stanzas, with all due respect to Rabindranath's own English version and of course the national anthem, our national anthem itself. And some things I think are worth remembering here. Phrases like Shubhona, something closer to divinity, while Chirosharati is another such word, invoking Godhead, some kind of Godhead. And the last stanza, of course, has the word Rajeshwar. Rabindranath himself translated that word as King of all kings. So we can know immediately what that signifies. Gandhiji understood the song's function. I quote Gandhiji, typically for him, very short and sweet. It is not only a song, but is also like a devotional hymn. That's something that we have to remember. Significantly, the addressee's gender changes in stanza 4 to Mata. How interesting. How many people actually think of that? Suddenly, from nowhere, it becomes Mata. I won't read out the original, you know it in Bangla yourselves. Because why does he do this? Divinity embodies the protective qualities of both genders. This aspect immediately can link Jana to Bangladesh's anthem, where Rabindranath personifies Bengal as a mother. And by the way, Amar Shonar Bangla begins the Swadesh section, indicating its magnitude in Rabindranath's thought. The mother's lap in Jana appears here as well. While in the last stanza of Amar Shonar Bangla, she is virtually transformed into a goddess. The historical context, of course, assumes importance too, because Rabindranath composed the song in 1905, as you all know, to protest the Bengal partition. Likewise, we should not forget that Jana in its later stanzas, which is 1911, it did not shy away from a just fight, using such vocabulary as victory, meaning joy, of course, terrible revolution, Shankhodhwani, which is a traditional call to battle, and invocation to the gods, crisis and sorrow. These are all part of a nation's history. We have to face them and fight them. Yet, more than fight, arms, it is love that dominates both anthems. Not just devotional or maternal, there is a direct Ami Tomai Bhalobashi in Amar Shonar Bangla, but also altruistic and secular democratic. Note the garland of love, Premohar, for all religions in Jana. He lists the faiths that at that time he felt was necessary to list, name, and love for all of them. I'm belaboring this point, but you know why, right? I mean, today it becomes necessary for us to talk about these matters. As well as in Amar Shonar Bangla, he talks about the farmers, the cowherds, who are all my fellows. In Jana, interestingly, Rabindranath added 4 faiths to those he had named in another spiritual, patriotic, humanist poem and song from 1910, 1 year before, Hemor Chitto, which is the next song in the Swadesh section after Jana. Just so that you know what we are talking about, Hemor Chitto, of course, you are aware of, but no one knows, this is the translation in English, no one knows whose call made streams of so many populations come from where on turbulent currents lose themselves in an ocean. Here Aryans, here non-Aryans, here Dravidians, Chinese, Shakars, Huns, Pathans, Mughals dissolved in one body. The doors open to the west today, and so on. And the next stanza Come, O Aryans, come non-Aryans, Hindus, Muslims, come today, come English, come Christians, come Brahmins, cleanse the mind, hold the hands of everyone, and so on. Today on the seashore of India's great humanity. The two anthems also raise other lyrical points of difference. Rabindranath based the melody of Amar Sonar Bangla on a traditional tune of the Baul folk singers in East Bengal, which he had heard, as you know, sung in a spiritual song by a village postman there. The third song of Swadesh, Jadavpur Dutt, similarly has Baul melodic origins, and again famously entranced Gandhiji to adopt it as a personal motto. Ironically, an intense and introspective solitary theme turned into a profound public rallying call thanks to Gandhiji's subjective but highly influential taste. Furthermore, in contrast to the more common musical and lexical registers in these two songs, Rabindranath composed Janagana Mano in compound Sanskritic vocabulary, a heavier idiom, and as well as a music that is comparatively rag influenced rather than folksy. The 21st century debates theorizing the distinctions amidst environmentalism, the green movement, and deep ecology have overlooked Rabindranath's contributions over 100 years ago, midway in the modernist continuum from romantic philosophies to the Anthropocene imperative today. Even a superficial reading of the Swadesh songs demonstrates how literally Rabindranath interpreted the word as Desh, our land, so that the land of Swadesh and nature in the Prakriti section merge into one and the same entity. The rural descriptions in Amar Sonar Bangla, the Kalidasa-like geographical bird's eye view in Hemor Chitto, if you remember that, could qualify both as nature songs. We can therefore name Rabindranath, I certainly feel so, as the world's first major green songwriter, which our global ecological environmental consciousness should take note of. And a holistic, even pantheistic awareness of immanence in nature connects these songs to puja too. The Gita Gita arranges the Prakriti songs according to the cycle of the Indian seasons. But many more lie elsewhere, in other sections. In the musical dramas, for instance, dedicated to specific seasons that Rabindranath composed for the pupils in Shantiniketan to perform, or in the annual tree plantation ceremony, Varsha Mongol. One may recall Vivaldi's The Four Seasons with its accompanying sonnet lyrics, but Rabindranath far surpassed that pioneering program music by his sheer abundance of such texts. And of course, the season of growth, the monsoons, attracted him the most. Numerically, nearly half the Prakriti section. For instance, a song like Hridoya Amar Nache, which has both peacocks and moyur and chilli, as well as the plants and trees that are mentioned there, and of course the monsoon rains themselves. Zoological and botanical awareness, which people in the city, especially the young generation, I fear, have lost track of. The analogy of Rabindranath's own artistic output to the peacock's shivering display, characteristic of the rains in India, comes naturally. I am a very bad hunter, so I can't but resist this kind of thing. The same applies to the rhythmic sway of the swing made of branches and Tagore's ear for musical cadence. Sometimes he repeats the refrain deliberately to catch that, which the printed lyrics won't have, but the song has. Alliteration and assonance enhance the musical effect. In this picture, the human figure cannot possibly be absent, obviously. Hair, eyes, shari, significantly female, symbolic of nature's fertility, whereas the village in this song apprehends the river flooding, equally typical during the monsoons but devastating. So it's not all good. It can also be a disaster. But that is part of nature and life. Many of Rabindranath's plays contain songs that became independently popular and performed as seasonal songs. For instance, Winter Harvest in Buddhadeva Tagore, Southerly Spring Breezes in Aj Dokkina Duar Khola. You know these. In fact, what is curious is that even Bangalira, they do not usually know that many of their most favored songs originated as compositions for specific plays. For example, the cosmic dance Momochitte Riti, which is from Raja Oloprati, or Shorbo Korbotare Doye from Topati, which, as you might know, Rabindranath wrote spontaneously on hearing the news that Jotin Das, the revolutionary, had died in Lahore jail. He was so distressed that he cancelled the evening's rehearsal for Topati, composed the song overnight, and began the tragedy with the song. But we forgot that history. The previously mentioned Poshto Vidatiyeche, Boshanto, they are placed in the Prokriti section, Ajidok Nidovar Kola. Momochitte, oddly enough, in the Vichitra section. And Shorbo Karvakar, obviously, in the Shodesh section. But this effectively erases their roots and rightful position as theatre songs belonging to the Nattogiti section. One can explain the cause for this. Rabindranath had already finalized the theme-based contents of the first 6 sections before the form-based Nattogiti section was compiled. Let's move ahead to music. The best part, said Rabindranath, in English, of a song is missed when the tune is absent, for thereby its movement and its color are lost, and it becomes like a butterfly whose wings have been plucked. I mean, I cannot think of a better image to signify this, and obviously only a poet like Rabindranath could have imagined this. In his writings as well as utterances, formal as well as casual, Rabindranath generally privileged music over words. In fact, he's written so much about it in Shongit Chinta, you probably are aware of this. I will skip this portion. He says that the songs of the lyrics, the texts of songs printed take away from the beauty of the songs, of my songs especially. An academician friend of mine who plays Western classical music questioned the need for staff notations of Rabindrasangit today, when musicians routinely pick up music by ear from proliferating audio media. Actually, therein lies the problem with Rabindrasangit recordings, as Shobhit Rai points out. Many of them do not do justice to the original scores and conflict with those that do. Consequently, Shobhit argues, I quote, Rabindrasangit must be kept alive immaculately as far as possible among these mediocrities. It can also be understood quite well that this task is not possible without scores. And his essay, which I translated, deals with the musical dimensions of Rabindrasangit at length. I must first point out that although Rabindranath typically sang his songs upon composing them, he never notated them. They were transcribed by various hands. At first within the extended family household in Jurashako, and later by others too in Shantiniketan. Literally second hand, which I don't mean negatively, of course. Therefore, it can be argued that a crucial break in transmission had already occurred between the composer and the transcriber, let alone the editors who mediated the latter's handwriting into print. This is also a problem, but I won't dwell on that right now. This is proved by the variations encountered in a few historical recordings of the oral tradition during Tagore's lifetime by singers close to him who had or claimed they had his approval. Shoktalit in his essay, and I in my CD, the one that Abhijit referred to, this CD, illustrate this conundrum with reference to the versions of Tohu Monerekho. Now, I realize that we are running short on time, so you all know Rabindranath's own Tohu Monerekho, and just here, Omya Devi's rendering of the same song. And you'll see that they belong to the same family. Omya Devi, in fact, was Rabindranath's actress singer, and they sing it differently. So shall we just skip this then, right? I mean, because I think everything should, I have them here, but maybe we should skip. I still have about 5 more minutes of text here. Is that okay? Let's see what.
It's okay.
What?
All of it.
We have. You all have heard Rabindranath's version. So maybe we can skip Gurudev, come to Omya Devi. And you can all, by the way, this is all available online. So go back home and hear them for yourselves in case you haven't heard Omya Devi. Early governance that affirms the legitimacy of different versions, musical interpretations of songs of Rabindranath in the canon. But for the vast majority of Rabindranath that survive only in one Vishwabharati score, that score assumes a position of authority like that of Shakespeare's dramatic texts. In both cases, we have lost the nuances and subtext of the Ur performance. Nevertheless, the printed scripts come closest to retrieving authorial intent. Shoktalit presents his own rationale for additionally abiding by Tagore's preferences in following certain principles of vocalization and accompaniment. He quotes Rabindranath towards the end of his life, exhorting singers of Rabindranath try to ensure that a little emotion, improvisation, empathy, and portamento stay in my songs. These are 4 catchwords that you all know of: Rosh, Tan, Dorod, which are translated as empathy, and portamento is need. That's all he wants. As long as you use those, it's fine. At least theoretically, it seems. By and large, most vocalists do that, but they do not obey his tastes in instrumentation. Even though he felt an antipathy towards the harmonium, you all know, photos of any Rabindranath singer today, or even in the past, show them invariably playing one. And audiovisual material find them frequently vamping it during unsung interludes. Singers' umbilical attachment to the harmonium is understandable. It provides easy support against going off pitch on any note or tone, which the traditional backing of tanpura does not. offering a maximum of just 4 notes or tones. But a harmonium definitely drowns the voice when overdone. Yet, that's the one instrument that has lasted. Although the piano occupied musical pride of place in Tagore's youth in Jorashako, where Rabindranath, elder brother, improvised on it while composing, and niece Indira played it flawlessly, Rabindranath's aversion to keyboard instruments arose from their inability to produce the tones of Shrutis, so important in Indian music, which, they identify 22 such distinct tones in the same space occupied by the 12 Western tones. I don't want to kind of go into too much technicality over here, but Rabindranath favored, therefore, the violin. He told Einstein in their famous conversations, "Somehow the piano confounds me. The violin pleases me much more." And of course, apart from violin, he preferred the esraj, a bowed string instrument that can smoothly touch the Shrutis when gliding from tone to tone, as Chaudhary Rai underscores. When I directed Arul Prathan on stage, for instance, I used as musicians, instrumentalists, only violinist, soloist, and electric guitarist. No keyboards. I don't have anything against keyboards, I love them, but it depends on the context. Rabindranath also disliked the conspicuous beats of the tabla, but not the ancient pakwaj or mridangam, and advised that if used at all, the tabla should deliver the tal gently. Chaudhary echoes this sentiment, even suggesting that bowed instruments like the dilruba can themselves provide such light rhythms. In other words, no percussion is required. However, today, harmoniums and synthesizers, tablas and drum machines rule Rabindrasangit. More so because hardly any musicians play Tagore's beloved esraj anymore, and relatively few the two old and sonorous double-ended percussion, pakhawaj and mridangam. Most studies and discussions of Rabindrasangit seem too obsessed with its deaths to and departures from Hindustani rags and tals, almost as if it is somehow inferior and the classical background somehow validates Rabindranath's musical creativity. That previously cited entry in Grove Music Online states, quote, "Tagore did not master any vocal style. This may have limited his technical range as composer." This is ridiculous, because in fact several first-hand reports exist of Rabindranath's Hindustani singing prowess. The leading music critics Dhurjyoti Prasad Mukherjee, Rabindranath Tagore, Rabindranath's own grandnephew, considered his variations of certain ragas so individualistic that these could be prefixed with his name, a convention, as you know, in Hindustani classical music. And they suggested Rabindra Todi, Rabindra Bhairavi, Rabindra Puravi, Rabindra Saram, or Rabi Mallar. While expressed out of respect, these feelings or ideas actually fall back on the narrative of scrutinizing Rabindrasangit through the classical prism. Instead, we should appreciate in greater depth his highly knowledgeable essays and lectures dissecting Hindustani classical music in Bangla, and they remain for the most part untranslated. Something that you young people should do. Although the Bengali scores routinely identified the ragas for Tagore's earlier songs, he dispensed with this practice later on, in keeping with his assertion that the content, especially bhav or emotion, and not the form, distinguishes his own work. Chaudhary also gives us a succinct introduction to Rabindranath's Hindustani heritage, as well as his spiritual and folk musical influences. And only by way of course, pointing out Rabindrasangit's distinctive qualities. And this is important because musicology, rather than vague, statements that we make all the time, has to be employed in making these distinctions. He understands the trajectory of Rabindranath's evolution as a songwriter, growing more attracted to folk song, moving to simplicity and developing particularly deep feelings for the baul. Of course, I must mention here, again something that the world outside Bengal tends to forget, that the bauls have a personal relationship with God, uniting Vaishnava and Sufi mysticism. Again, something that needs to be asserted nowadays. Heartfelt devotion, metaphysical love in plain colloquial language, which strengthened Rabindranath's belief in the reciprocity between the finite and infinite worlds. More gratuitous, in my view, is how much commentators make of Rabindranath's directly acknowledged melodic and sometimes lyric sources. The Gikogitan dutifully asterisks a little over 200 songs as inspired by specific indigenous compositions from a variety of regional traditions: Hindustani, Carnatic, Sikh, Baul, so on. They account for just about 1/10 of Rabindranath's oeuvre. Relative to that low ratio, the amount of discursive space they get is disproportionately high. Possibly because the availability of the original tunes alongside Rabindranath's transcreations allows scope for comparative treatment. The remaining 90% of Rabindrasangit simply do not offer those opportunities for reference points, except rag similarities. Even more disproportionate attention is lavished on the merely dozen songs that the Gita marks as derived from foreign, mainly British origins. How does one transfer so culture-specific a genre as Rabindrasangit, driven by Indian music's reliance on melody, to Western harmonic arrangement? Philip Stern opined in a very purist vein, the songs of Tagore will not suffer harmonization. The most important things they offer, and this is almost 100 years ago, it seems to me, are the continuity of melodic line, delicacy, suppleness, intervals other than the temperate scale, inflection drawn out which melts into nostalgia, tenderness. Everything that contributes to their value is destroyed if they are encased in the frame of too simple a rhythm with too insistent a beat. And here he says clearly he does not like the martial percussion given to Jana Gana Mana after it became the national anthem. I quote him, "That song he had sung to me, the delicate continuous line with its accents on victory, now had become a military march, hammered out with a regular beat, its essence lost." In general, Philip Stern advocated a cappella, that is to say, no instrumentation, just voice, kholawala, as the most appropriate style. But of course, Chaudhary's thinks that Rabindrasangit can indeed gain from elaborate settings, even orchestral settings, and I agree. If Rabindranath himself freed his music from attachment to any labels, his music in turn should receive freedom of interpretation from all over the world. Listeners and broad-minded connoisseurs can decide what works and what does not. Now I do fear that I have overstepped, right? So why don't we skip the theatre section, but I will move to the images and just show you some so that you get some idea of the interconnectedness between song, painting, and theatre. Very few researchers have done work along these lines. Just one or two, three, four. Okay. If you can switch the lights off. If you can pick the first one. Three of these are by Rabindranath, one by Ananda Lal. We need lights off to actually get this. Can you see it properly? The first three paintings, very famous paintings, one more famous than the others, by Rabindranath, who was involved in the production of Phalguni, right? And this is actually the background as the production had it. There was a painted background with those stars at the back, and there have been eyewitness accounts of how moving this particular scene was. As you know, Rabindranath played, I'm sorry, I should be using this mic. Rabindranath himself played the baul, and this is the song. Now, nobody actually has identified the song, so I went through Phalguni, and I think that the moment that is being talked about over here, painted about over here by Rabindranath, is the famous Dhire Dhire Boltugo Dhire Dhire, which is the concluding song as he moves away into the distance, the concluding song in scene 3. As we are told, extremely moving. Move to the next one. This, of course, is the most famous one, but people just think that this is a picture of a painting of Rabindranath dancing as a baul. Well, of course, actually, in the character of the baul in Phalguni, in the next scene, scene 4, Bashante Phul Kantho. And you can see, I mean, if you know the song, then you can see what he's doing. He's dancing and singing to that song. This is the Bashante song. Move to the third. This, I believe, is one of the last songs in Phalguni, Tomaye Notun Kore. And I would like you to see that he is playing what appears to be Totara. Maybe an elaborate Aktara, why not? But that's the only thing that he is using. And these are identified as Phalguni paintings, true, but nobody has actually talked about the aesthetic and artistic mingling of 3 different art forms, that is to say, of course, or 4 if you will, literature, music, and painting and theatre that is taking place in this one historic artifact. Move to the 4th. This is by Ananda Lal of Noti Puja. Ananda Lal painting his own daughter, Gauri, as the Noti, Srimati. And possibly, I think this is Srimati's last dance and song, after which she dies. So, again, a very evocative, the way the garland is being used, the entire movement, you can almost get in a 2-dimension the effect of 3-dimensional movement, motion, courtesy of Ananda Lal. So let's pause for now. Enough that I have kind of bored you with. Thank you once again for patiently listening, and I hand this over to the chair.
Hello. Thank you, Ananda. I'm absolutely unqualified to comment on any aspect of Ananda's brilliant lecture, illuminating, insightful, drawing attention to something very unknown and yet very known but yet unknown, urging us to listen in a new way. I would not make any remark here, but emboldened by one stray comment on publishing and printing history, I would just allow myself one little remark, which is well known to you that many of, as you know, Rabindranath's go-to publishers were not in Kolkata but in Hyderabad. Babu Chintamani Ghosh published, among others, one of his first books of songs called Gan, which was badly misprinted Rabindranath didn't like it. The entire edition was done by Chintamani Ghosh and printed again afresh at his own expense. Later in 1914, Rabindranath asked Chintamani Ghosh to print Gita in 2 weeks, and he took it as a challenge and printed it in 5 days. Why do I refer to our Chintamani Ghosh? And here there's a coincidence here. On Monday, 3 of us from the School of Culture, Texts and Records will be at the Indian Press at the invitation of the family of Chintamani Ghosh to sift through their archives, see if we can find any treasures, digitize it. So, while we're talking about that, this is something that you would be very interested in. Maybe there's some treasure hidden there. I don't know. It is still a going concern in Allahabad now called Prayagraj, but we hope that we might find something which they're over there. They have a printing press in Kolkata as well, but the papers of the family and patriarch are still there, we are told, in Allahabad, which would probably make it the first ever surviving archive of a publishing house from the 19th and 20th century. But thank you very much, Ananda. Thank you everyone for listening to us. I think we have a subsequent session coming up. Thank you, and thank you for asking me to check this.